People who once ignored you, dismissed you, laughed behind your back, suddenly came knocking, not to apologize, but to take something that matters more than anything. Because that's exactly what happened to me. One Thursday morning, while sipping cold brew on my sun-bleached porch overlooking the Carolina coast, I got a message that would flip my world upside down. Hey Claire. Long time. We're planning a class of '05 reunion at the Bayview in July 15th. Would love to see you there, Lacey. Lacey. Of course. The name made my stomach twist, not from nostalgia, but from memory. Lacey Whitmore, high school royalty, queen of the lunchroom, and unofficial gatekeeper of who mattered and who didn't. Guess which side I was on? But now she was texting me like we were old friends, like none of that ever happened. Like she hadn't spent 4 years pretending I didn't exist unless it was to snicker about my thrift store jeans or the way I always sat alone during assemblies. Why now? I thought. Why me? I locked my phone and stared out at the ocean where the morning fog hovered just above the tide. It was peaceful here. Safe. This house, my father's old beach house, was the one place that felt truly mine. I had fought for it, rebuilt it, made it my home after years of drifting through cities and apartments that never belonged to me. And now, the past was knocking again. Not just knocking, waltzing back in with smiley emojis and forced exclamations. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? I couldn't stop rereading the message. I hadn't been back to that town in almost 2 decades. I left right after graduation and never looked back. No Christmas visits, no awkward run-ins at the grocery store. My mom's family still lived there, but after Dad died, things got cold fast. There were unspoken rules, quiet judgments. I didn't belong, and they made sure I knew it. But now they were organizing a reunion? A whole event dedicated to pretending we'd all been friends? Please. I opened Instagram and checked Lacey's page. Sure enough, the Bayview and was tagged in her latest story, an overfiltered video of champagne glasses and some cackling laughter in the background. She hadn't changed. Her bio even said, "Wifey mama manifesting good vibes." I rolled my eyes so hard I nearly strained something. Still, something in me lingered. Why invite me at all? A mass message? A mistake? Or worse, intentional? Was this guilt? Curiosity? Or did they know? See, what most people from that town didn't know was that the Monroe Beach house, the one people used to call that old shack by the dunes, was now worth nearly $2.5 million. They didn't know I'd poured 5 years and every ounce of energy into restoring it. That I ran a successful interior design firm in San Diego. That HGTV once did a feature on the remodel. That a celebrity chef offered to rent it for the summer twice. They probably just remembered it as the place with peeling paint and the widow who cried on the porch every morning until she moved in with her sister and left me behind. I'd never cared about showing off. But now I wondered if the reunion was more than a social call. The beach breeze picked up, rustling the sea oats near the deck, and my mind flashed back to the last day I saw Lacey in person. Senior year, gym class. She and her friends had locked me in the supply closet after I outscored her on a group project. They said it was just a prank. I sat in the dark for 38 minutes before a janitor found me. No apology. No consequences. Just that smug smile when I passed her in the hallway the next day. And now, here she was reaching out like nothing had ever happened. I didn't respond. Not immediately. Instead, I pulled up the calendar app on my phone and stared at the date, July 15th, 6 weeks from now. Could I really go back? What would I even say? Hi, remember me? The girl you all left out? The one you made feel invisible? Yeah, I own the house you used to laugh at. And no, you can't have it. Too petty. Too real. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Block the number. Go on with my life and never look back. But another part, the part that remembered every slight, Every time I was picked last or not picked at all, wanted something more. Closure? Revenge? Maybe just answers. I picked up my phone again, thumb hovering over the keyboard. Sure, I'll be there. I typed. Then I paused. Should I? I thought of my father again. His quiet strength. The way he used to say, people don't always get what they deserve, Claire. But you don't need to give them that power. I deleted the message. Instead, I opened my notes app and typed one sentence. Go. Not for them. For you. By sunset, I had made my decision. I wasn't going back to be part of their charade. I was going to remind myself of how far I'd come and just how much I didn't owe them. They left me out for years. Now they wanted back in. Because of a house? Because of my success? Yeah, no. Let's see how this reunion really plays out. There's a strange kind of silence that clings to childhood memories, especially when those memories are filled with empty seats at birthday parties and questions you're too embarrassed to ask out loud. Like, why don't they like me? Or, what's wrong with me? I grew up in a small coastal town called Fairhaven, where everyone knew each other's grandparents and secrets spread faster than thunderstorms. It was beautiful in the kind of way that made tourists jealous: quaint shops, driftwood fences, wraparound porches, and summer air that smelled like sunscreen and saltwater. But if you weren't part of a certain circle, that beauty could feel like a trap. My mother came from one of Fairhaven's oldest families, moneyed, well-groomed, and obsessed with appearances. She married my father, a blue-collar carpenter with calloused hands and no pedigree, against their wishes. They tolerated him, barely. Me, even less. I didn't fit their mold. I wasn't bubbly or delicate or proper. I liked books and building things with Dad in the garage. I was quiet, too smart for my own good, and bad at pretending. That made me a problem. At school, it didn't take long for the other kids to figure out I was different. Lacey and her crew, Amanda, Brooke, and Chelsea, ruled everything from the volleyball team to the spring formal. They had matching friendship bracelets, lip gloss from Sephora, and moms who hosted wine nights. I had a second-hand backpack, hand-me-down jeans, and a mom who rarely spoke to me unless it was to correct me. If Dad hadn't been there, I don't think I would have made it through high school in one piece. He was everything my mother wasn't: warm, patient, always listening. On weekends, we'd head to the beach house, then more a weathered cabin than a home, and he'd teach me how to sand wood or repair busted hinges. It was our place, just the two of us. That porch with its chipped paint and creaky swing felt more like a hug than anything my family gave me. The first time I realized I was invisible, I was 12. A sleepover invite list passed around class, and my name wasn't on it. Lacey handed me the flyer with a smirk and said, "You can come if you want, but there's not a lot of space, so don't take it personally if you can't stay over." I didn't go. I stayed home, made popcorn with Dad, and watched reruns of Fixer Upper. He never asked why I was sad, just handed me an extra blanket and said, "You've got time. They'll catch up to you one day." They never did. By high school, I'd stopped trying. I built a wall of sarcasm and distance. I volunteered in the art room, worked part-time at a thrift shop downtown, and planned my escape. College wasn't a maybe for me, it was a lifeline. But that didn't mean the pain stopped. Like the time during sophomore year when someone slid a note into my locker that said, "You should try smiling. Might help your face." Or the time I got a solo in choir and Lacey accidentally spilled water on my music 5 minutes before the concert. They weren't just mean. They were calculated. And I took it all. Every jab, every exclusion, every fake smile that turned into laughter the second I walked away. Because I didn't have the luxury of lashing out. I had to survive. My mother never noticed. Or if she did, she didn't care. "You need to be less intense," she said once when I came home crying in 8th grade. "No one likes a girl who tries too hard. Smile more." But Dad, he noticed everything. When I won an art contest freshman year and no one clapped except for a teacher, he drove 6 hours from a construction site to take me out for pie and say, "You've got something they don't even see yet." When I got into UC San Diego on a partial scholarship, he stood outside the mailbox and read the letter 3 times before hugging me like it was the only thing keeping him standing. "You're gonna build your own world, kiddo," he whispered. "And you won't owe any of them a damn thing." He died 2 months after I moved into the dorms. Heart attack. Sudden. Alone in the beach house. I flew back for the funeral, numb and hollow, only to find out my mother had already decided to let go of the house. Said it was too much work. Said it didn't make sense for a Monroe girl to keep a broken-down shack. I fought. Hard. She threatened lawyers. I sold my car, worked 2 jobs, and scraped together enough to buy it legally from her share. Every dollar I made after college went into that house. Restoring it, updating it, making it beautiful again while keeping every piece of him alive in its bones. Now it's my haven. And they want back in? Funny how people only remember you when you have something they want. To them, I was the girl no one noticed. But they're about to remember me real fast. You know that old saying, success is the best revenge? I never chased success out of spite. I chased it because I had no other choice. After my dad died, everything that had once been stable in my world just collapsed. My mother didn't even try to hide her relief. She sold his tools, boxed up his clothes without asking me, and started making plans to rent out the beach house like it was just another dusty property on a spreadsheet. I remember standing in the doorway of that house the day before I left for college. The porch was rotting, the shutters hung loose, and the smell of salt and cedar clung to everything. But it was still his. And I made a promise right there with my hand on the weather-worn doorframe. I'll bring you back. I swear. San Diego was a different world. At UCSD, I finally felt anonymous in a good way. No one knew my family. No one cared that I was the weird, quiet girl from Fairhaven. I got to hit reset. I majored in visual arts with a concentration in environmental design, basically, architecture for people who love beauty but hate math. I threw myself into it. While everyone else was at parties or the beach, I was sketching floor plans, interning at tiny design firms, and living off frozen burritos. I hustled. I didn't just want to succeed, I had to. Because in the back of my mind, I still heard the whispers, the laughter, the fake apologies. I wanted to be untouchable. After graduation, I got a junior designer job at a boutique interior firm that specialized in luxury coastal homes. It didn't pay well, but it gave me access to clients, to techniques, to vision. For 5 years, I climbed the ranks. I worked 70-hour weeks. I managed difficult clients, last-minute renovations, and back-to-back deadlines. I became the woman who walked into a room and got quiet respect, not because I demanded it, but because I earned it. Then one day, a client invited me to Palm Springs to redesign a guest villa. She said she loved my sense of emotional space. Emotional space. I'd never heard anyone put it like that. But it stuck with me. Because everything I created, every room, every wall, every detail, wasn't just about design. It was about healing. Making places that made people feel something. By year 7, I launched my own firm, Sea Glass Interiors. I started small, renting a tiny office near Ocean Beach with peeling paint and a rusty fan that clicked every 5 seconds. Within a year, I had 5 clients. By year 2, 15. Year 3, I landed a redesign on a historic home in La Jolla that ended up featured on HGTV. And through it all, one goal remained: buy back the beach house. It took every ounce of my savings, some strategic groveling with my bank, and a miracle-level lowball from my mother, who clearly wanted to wash her hands of it. I signed the paperwork on a gray October morning and drove out to Fairhaven the next day. When I pulled up to the beach house for the first time in nearly 10 years, I cried. Not quiet tears, ugly, shoulder-shaking sobs. It was still standing, but barely. Windows cracked, roof bowed, porch splintered. But it was mine. Dad's spirit lived in the beams, in the pine floors, in the rusty wind chimes that still hung outside the kitchen window. I walked through every room, touching the walls like they might remember me. The renovation took 2 years. 2 years of commuting on weekends, hauling supplies, hiring local contractors, arguing with inspectors, fighting back tears, and rebuilding the home that raised me. I kept the bones. Dad's design was too good to erase, but added a few touches of my own. Vaulted ceilings, whitewashed shiplap, glass doors that opened straight onto the dune path. I kept the original fireplace and restored the porch swing. Every decision was intentional. Not just about aesthetics. About honoring. By the time I was done, the house had transformed from a forgotten shack into a luxury beachfront cottage, featured in coastal living no less. People started calling it the Monroe Retreat. They assumed it was a new build. They didn't know the story. They didn't see the girl who spent her high school years eating lunch in the art room and sketching out imaginary floor plans on notebook paper because it made her feel like she had control over something. They just saw a woman with a beautiful house on the coast. But I knew, and that made all the difference. That's why, when I got Lacey's text, I didn't panic. I didn't feel small or scared or uncertain. I just felt ready. Let them see what I've built. Let them ask questions they don't deserve answers to. Let them pretend it's just a house. Because to me, it's not just wood and drywall. It's survival. It's love. It's mine. The night before the reunion, I stood in front of my closet, staring at a sea of clothes I didn't want to wear. Everything I owned felt to me, too now. I needed something that said, I'm different. I'm not that girl anymore. Not the girl who slunk into the back of the room. Not the girl who ate lunch alone. Not the girl who dreamed of leaving and never looking back. I sifted through my wardrobe, pulling out items and discarding them one by one, too casual, too loud, too I've made it. Then I found it. A dress I'd worn once, when I was 23, at a wedding I didn't want to go to. It was simple. Black, with a slightly off-the-shoulder neckline and a belt that cinched at the waist, giving it structure without being too dramatic. This will do. I put the dress on, adjusted my hair, and stared at myself in the mirror. What would they think when they saw me? Would they even recognize me? The awkward girl they'd tormented in high school was long gone. The woman standing here now had fought for everything she had. But what would I prove by showing up tomorrow? A knock at the door pulled me out of my thoughts. Claire. A voice, too familiar, sounded through the door. You almost ready? I froze. It was Mom. I hadn't told her about the reunion. She'd been quiet about my decision to buy the beach house, but the silence didn't mean she approved. I braced myself for what was coming. I'll be out in a second, I said, trying to steady my voice. Her footsteps retreated down the hall. I heard her start to hum, her version of letting it go, the way she always did when she was upset but didn't want to admit it. I was about to face Lacey, Amanda, Brooke, and everyone else who had made me feel less than, who had made my high school years feel like a nightmare. But there was something else gnawing at me. The beach house wasn't just a piece of real estate, it was the last tether I had to Dad. It felt like the one thing that no one could take from me. And yet, here I was, about to walk into their world again, the world I'd left behind. To them, it was probably just a get-together, a chance to pretend like the years of cruelty didn't matter. But to me, it felt like more than that. The drive to the reunion was longer than I expected, and the more miles I put between myself and the house, the more my doubts crept in. I glanced at the invitation in my hand, Bayview Inn, 7 p.m. The same place they'd always held their elite parties, though now it seemed like just another faded building. When I pulled into the parking lot, I sat in my car for a while, my hands gripping the steering wheel. The headlights of other cars flickered in the distance, and the low hum of voices echoed across the parking lot. There they were, arriving. Do you belong here, Claire? I exhaled sharply. You're not the same person anymore, I muttered to myself. You don't have to prove anything. But somehow, it didn't feel like that at all. I walked up to the entrance of the inn, my heels clicking against the gravel, each step louder than the last. As soon as I stepped inside, the familiar scent of overpriced wine and old carpet hit me. The chatter, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, it was all exactly as I remembered. It was like stepping into a time machine. And then, there they were. Lacey was the first to spot me. Her eyes widened, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of something guilt? Fear? Then she quickly masked it with that signature smile of hers, the one that had always been so cold. "Claire," she said, almost too loudly. "Oh my gosh, you made it." She stepped forward and pulled me into a hug, one of those hugs that lasts just a second too long, the kind that makes you wonder if the person is really happy to see you or just trying to avoid an awkward silence. "You look amazing," she added, stepping back to assess me, her gaze flicking over my outfit, my hair, anything that might give away some secret about my life. I smiled coolly. "Thanks, Lacey. You look exactly the same." Her cheeks flushed, but she quickly recovered, glancing over her shoulder to Amanda, who was talking to someone at the bar, and then back to me. "I'm so glad you could come," Lacey said. "We've all missed you. Everyone's been asking about you." The words hung in the air like a warning. I didn't know whether to laugh or roll my eyes. "I'm sure they have," I said, my voice as calm as I could muster. "So, where's everyone else?" Lacey gestured over to a group near the bar. Amanda, Brooke, Chelsea, the whole crew, all clustered around the same old gossip circle. They didn't even seem to notice I was standing there at first. Then, one by one, they looked up. First, Amanda's eyes narrowed, and then Brooke raised an eyebrow. Chelsea just smiled, that kind of smile, the one that said, "I remember what we did to you, and I'm still proud of it." I stood there for a moment, the weight of their gazes pushing down on me. For a split second, I wondered if I was the one who didn't belong. But then something clicked. They weren't the ones who had the power anymore. I did. And just like that, I was no longer the girl they could push around. The night passed in a blur of fake pleasantries and awkward silences. At one point, Lacey, Amanda, and Brooke took turns catching up with me, all of them asking the same questions with just a touch too much enthusiasm. "So, how's business?" Lacey asked, her voice a little too sweet. "You must be doing really well. That beach house, that must be so much work." "Yeah," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "But it's worth it. It's the one place that really feels like home." Brooke smiled. "I bet. It's got a lot of character, I hear." I noticed how she avoided looking at me directly, like she wasn't sure if she should be complimenting me or envying me. They wanted something. They all did. And I wasn't about to let them take it. The first sign that something was off came when Lacey casually mentioned the beach house again. We were standing by the buffet table, and I had just helped myself to a little too much shrimp cocktail, pretending to care about the event. Lacey leaned in, her voice pitched low enough for only me to hear. "You know, Claire," she said, popping a piece of cucumber into her mouth, "it must have been hard, losing your dad and all. I mean, your family's always had it so perfect, right? But that beach house, it must be nice to have a piece of him left, even if it's just a house." Her words were sharp, coated in honey. I could feel the slight sting of sarcasm underneath, but I kept my face neutral. The old Claire would have shrunk away, unsure of how to respond to the passive-aggressive comment. The new Claire, though, stood taller. "Yeah," I said, my voice smooth, "it's a part of him. And it's a part of me now, too. You know, I've put a lot into it. It's more than just the memories. It's a legacy." Lacey's smile faltered for a split second, but it quickly returned, warmer if possible. "Of course. That's exactly what I mean. But, I was just thinking," she trailed off, as if considering her next words carefully. "It's a really beautiful property, Claire. You know, you could probably make a lot of money if you decided to sell it, right?" I'm sure there's someone out there who would pay top dollar for a house like that. I felt my stomach churn. It was a soft, almost imperceptible nudge, just a suggestion, a friendly comment, but it was as clear as day to me. They wanted the house. They wanted it, and they were going to use every angle they could find to get their hands on it. Before I could respond, Amanda appeared beside us, flashing her signature plastic smile. Lacey's right, you know. The property's prime real estate. With that kind of view, you could probably sell it for a fortune, especially with the way the market's been heating up around here. I mean, you wouldn't want to get stuck with all that upkeep forever, right? She laughed, but it was the kind of laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. I swallowed the knot in my throat and straightened my back. I'm not selling, I said, the words coming out firmer than I intended. It's not for sale. Amanda shrugged, the edges of her smile softening just a fraction. Well, it's your life, Claire. But just know that if you ever change your mind, she let the sentence hang in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. For a moment, I stood there, trying to calm my racing thoughts. It was all so transparent now. Lacey's casual mention, Amanda's careful suggestion. I wasn't just dealing with old friends who wanted to reconnect. They weren't just asking about my life out of genuine curiosity. They had a plan. They always had a plan. And it wasn't to rekindle our high school friendship. It was to take what I'd worked so hard to build. I turned away from them, my hand tightening around the glass in my hand. They haven't changed. The thought was bitter, but it was the truth. These were the same people who had made me feel invisible, the same people who had belittled me for years. Now, they were going to try to steal what was mine. I should have been more prepared. I should have known that they wouldn't just let me leave the reunion without making their move. But I was not going to let them win this time. As the night wore on, I made sure to stay away from Lacey, Amanda, and their group. I spent the rest of the evening conversing with people who actually seemed interested in who I had become, not what I owned. Several classmates who had been kind in high school, ones I hadn't been close to but always appreciated, came over to chat. We reminisced, laughed, and caught up. It was refreshing, and it made me remember what it had felt like to be seen as more than just an outsider. But in the back of my mind, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every time I glanced over to where Lacey and Amanda were talking, I saw them exchange glances, their whispers not so discreet. It was like they were huddling together, coming up with their next move. The feeling of unease continued to grow until, just before the reunion was set to end, I caught a glimpse of something that stopped me in my tracks. At the far corner of the room, standing near the bar, I saw an unfamiliar face, tall, dark hair, sharply dressed. He was watching me, his eyes lingering too long before he turned his attention back to the group of old classmates. I didn't recognize him at first, but something about the way he was observing me made my stomach twist. Before I could get a closer look, Lacey and Amanda appeared at my side, both with smiles plastered on their faces. "So glad you could make it tonight, Claire," Lacey said, leaning in a little too close, her breath carrying the faintest scent of too much perfume. "It's been nice catching up." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. There was something about the way she said it, something about the way Amanda was eyeing me, that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "I'm glad you came, too," I said carefully, keeping my eyes on the crowd. Lacey caught my gaze and followed it. When her eyes fell on the man at the bar, I saw a flicker of recognition flash in her eyes. "You know, Claire," Lacey began again, her tone colder now. "We were just talking, and it's amazing to see how far you've come. But you know, sometimes," she paused, as if weighing her words, "sometimes it's not just about what you've built. It's about who's going to help you maintain it." She glanced at Amanda, who nodded ever so slightly, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of her mouth. I had heard enough. Something wasn't right, and I wasn't about to stand there and let them play their game. "I think I'll head out," I said curtly, my voice tight. "Thanks for the, memories." I turned and walked away, not looking back, though I could feel their eyes on me. As I headed toward the exit, I passed by the man standing by the bar. This time, I was close enough to see his face. I froze. It was Ethan Monroe, my cousin. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw him standing there, right in front of the bar. Ethan Monroe. My cousin. The one I hadn't seen in years. Not since Dad's funeral when he disappeared into the background, just another shadow in a room full of mourners. At first, I thought it was some kind of bizarre coincidence. But as I stared at Ethan, tall, with a strong jawline and those same piercing blue eyes that ran in the family, it was clear. This was no mistake. Why was he here? I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. I had just stepped out of the thick tension of the reunion, but now I was walking straight into a new one, this one more personal, more confusing. I made my way through the crowd, determined not to let him see the storm of thoughts swirling in my head. When I reached him, he looked up, his expression unreadable. For a brief moment, we both just stood there, staring at each other. "Claire," he said finally, his voice low, the tone somewhat guarded. "It's been a long time." I couldn't help the skepticism that crept into my voice. "What are you doing here, Ethan?" He looked around the room briefly, his gaze flicking past me to the familiar faces of old classmates still mingling and drinking. He was clearly out of place, like a puzzle piece trying to fit into the wrong picture. "I heard about the reunion," he said, his words deliberate. "I thought I should come by, see how everyone's doing." I narrowed my eyes. "Sure, of course you did. Just out of curiosity." Ethan didn't answer right away. He took a sip of his drink, his fingers tapping against the glass in a rhythm that only he seemed to hear. "You could say that. But it's not just that." I stared at him. My cousin had always been enigmatic, but this was something else. "Okay, let's cut to the chase," I said, my patience wearing thin. "What's really going on, Ethan? Why are you here? You've barely shown your face around the family in years." He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, then met my gaze directly. "I heard you bought the beach house," he said, his voice quiet, but loaded with something I couldn't quite place. "The place where your dad lived." I froze. "Yeah, so what?" Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly, and I saw a flicker of something beneath the surface. Guilt? Regret? Maybe even a little fear. But whatever it was enough to make me uneasy. "You don't know everything about that house, Claire," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not everything that happened after your dad passed." My heart skipped a beat. I'd always assumed that after Dad's death, everything had fallen into place. I had inherited the beach house because it was my birthright, my connection to the family legacy. It was supposed to be a symbol of what I had built, of the life I had fought for. But now, with Ethan's words hanging in the air, I realized that maybe I didn't know as much as I thought. I took a step closer, my pulse quickening. "What do you mean?" Ethan glanced around, as if ensuring no one was listening, before lowering his voice even further. "You don't know the full story about your dad's will. You don't know about the deal he made with my father before he passed, the one that changed everything." I felt my stomach drop. "A deal? What kind of deal?" He hesitated. I can't go into all the details here. It's complicated, Claire. But that house, your dad promised it to my father with conditions." I took a step back, my mind racing. This was too much. Too much to process in one moment. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice shaking now. "My dad never mentioned anything about a deal. He never told me about any promise he made to your father." Ethan sighed heavily, running a hand through his hair. "I know. Your dad kept a lot of things secret, Claire. And I don't blame him. But the truth is," he paused, his eyes flickering with a mix of emotions. "Your dad promised the beach house to my family, but he also agreed to keep it a secret from you. I don't know why, but it had something to do with the inheritance. Something about the property's value after his death. He didn't want to tell you because he didn't think you'd be able to handle it." The air around me grew heavy, and I felt like I was suffocating. My mind was spinning, trying to connect the dots. My dad? Keeping something from me? A promise to his brother, Ethan's father, about the beach house? Why didn't you tell me this before? I demanded, my voice a mix of anger and confusion. Why wait until now? Ethan rubbed the back of his neck, looking uncomfortable. I didn't know how to. And to be honest, I didn't think it was my place to tell you. But when I heard you bought the house, I knew it was time for you to know the truth. I was silent for a moment, processing everything he had just said. A wave of disbelief washed over me, and the ground beneath my feet seemed to shift. My father, the man who had always been so protective, so firm in his belief that his family would never be torn apart by money or betrayal, had made a secret deal behind my back. And not just any deal, but one that involved the one thing I had always believed would be mine, the beach house. The anger began to bubble up, and I clenched my fists, fighting to keep my voice steady. You're telling me my father promised the house to your family? Why would he do that? After everything? Ethan shook his head, his expression somber. I don't have all the answers, Claire. But I know enough to tell you that things are more complicated than they seem. And now, with you owning the house, the rest of the family, my father, Lacey, Amanda, they all think they have a claim to it. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, each beat harder than the last. This wasn't just about the beach house anymore. It was about my entire relationship with my family, everything I had believed, everything I had built, suddenly crumbling into dust. I didn't ask for this, I said, my voice breaking, though I tried to stay composed. I didn't ask for any of this. Ethan looked at me, his gaze filled with an unfamiliar sorrow. I know, but now you're going to have to decide what to do with it. And with the family. I could feel the weight of his words sinking in, the full gravity of what he was saying. The beach house, my inheritance, my refuge, wasn't just a place. It was a battlefield. A place where old wounds were going to reopen. And it was no longer just my decision to make. The drive home was a blur. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as I navigated through the winding streets, the evening air cool against my skin through the cracked window. My mind was still reeling from the conversation with Ethan. His words echoed in my head, relentless and heavy. Your dad promised the beach house to my father. And now the family thinks they have a claim to it. I couldn't wrap my head around it. My father had been so protective of the beach house, so adamant that it would be mine one day. It was a piece of him, a part of my past and my future. It was my connection to everything that had shaped me, my home, my sanctuary. And now it was a bargaining chip, a point of contention. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the weight of everything pressing down on me was suffocating. I barely remembered getting out of the car, stumbling into the house, and locking the door behind me. It felt like everything in my life was slipping through my fingers, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I paced around the living room for what felt like hours, my thoughts spiraling. I needed answers. I needed to know what was really going on. But what was I supposed to do with the truth? Ethan had dropped a bombshell, but he hadn't given me any way to fix it. No roadmap to untangle the mess that had suddenly become my life. It wasn't long before my phone buzzed on the coffee table, breaking my spiral. I glanced at the screen, seeing a text from an unexpected source. Amanda. Amanda. Claire, we need to talk. It's important. Call me when you get a chance. I stared at the message, my heart skipping a beat. What could she possibly want? After everything that had happened at the reunion, I had no desire to engage with her or anyone else from that group. But something about the message felt urgent, and despite myself, my finger hovered over the screen, dialing her number. She picked up on the second ring. Claire. Amanda's voice was cool, but carried an edge I hadn't heard before. We need to clear the air. This whole beach house situation, it's been complicated, and it's only going to get messier if we don't address it. I could already feel the anger bubbling up, but I forced myself to remain calm. Messier? You mean because you and Lacey are trying to take it from me? There was a pause on the other end, a slight intake of breath, before she responded. It's not like that, Claire. You know I care about you. But your dad's will. This deal with Ethan's father. there's more to it than you understand. There's history here, family history. I felt my chest tighten. So now you're going to pretend you're here for me? After everything? No, Amanda said, her voice softening slightly. I'm not pretending. I'm telling you the truth. We all have a stake in this. And I think it's time we work together to figure out what happens next. I could feel my pulse racing, my blood boiling. Work together? What exactly do you think that means, Amanda? You and Lacey want that house. And you've been waiting for me to mess up. Well, guess what? I'm not giving it to you. It's mine. There was silence on the other end, and then Amanda sighed. Look, Claire. I know you're upset, but I'm trying to help you. Lacey and we didn't want it to come to this. We're family. We should be able to work this out without tearing each other apart. Family? I spat out the word like it was a curse. You're not family, Amanda. Family doesn't stab each other in the back over a house. Family doesn't show up at a reunion pretending to care when all they really want is what's mine. I'm not doing that. Amanda's voice was firmer now. But you need to understand that if this goes to court, it won't just be about the beach house. It'll tear the entire family apart. You can't just ignore what your dad did. I'm trying to help you avoid that. I closed my eyes, the weight of her words sinking in. So what? You're asking me to just let it go? Pretend this is all okay? No, Amanda said. I'm asking you to consider a different path. There's a way to make this right, Claire. But you're going to have to let go of the idea that this is only your decision. It's not. There are more people involved than just you. I felt the air in the room grow thick. So, what are you suggesting? That I just hand over the house? No, she said quietly, but I am suggesting we talk about it. We can negotiate. We can find a way that works for everyone. I almost laughed in disbelief. You think I'm just going to give in? No, Amanda. This isn't a negotiation. This is my family's legacy, and I'm not letting anyone take it from me. There was another long pause, this one more filled with tension than anything else. Finally, Amanda spoke again, her voice quieter this time. Okay, but you should know, Claire, if this goes to court, things are going to get ugly. And I'm not sure you're ready for that. None of us are. The words hung in the air between us, heavy and foreboding. Before I could respond, Amanda hung up. I stood in the silence that followed, the room spinning around me. I didn't know who I could trust anymore. My family, people I had grown up with, people I thought I knew, had become strangers. They weren't the people who had once shared memories with me. They were strangers who wanted something I couldn't give. And worse, now they were threatening to tear everything apart to get it. My hand trembled as I set my phone down on the coffee table, the realization setting in like a cold wave. The beach house wasn't just a home anymore. It was a battleground. And I was going to have to fight for it. The next few days were a blur. Every time I walked past the beach house, I felt the weight of everything bearing down on me. The place that had once been a sanctuary, a space that held all of my happiest memories with Dad, was now a symbol of everything I stood to lose. I couldn't shake the feeling that everyone, my family, my cousins, Amanda, was circling, waiting for me to crack. But I wasn't going to crack. Not now. I spent hours that first evening researching everything I could about inheritance laws, property disputes, and how things like this typically played out. The more I read, the more I realized that I wasn't prepared for what was coming. The truth Ethan had revealed about the deal between my father and his father had shifted everything. The idea that my dad could have made such an agreement and kept it a secret from me was something I couldn't wrap my mind around. I wasn't just fighting for a house, I was fighting for my own understanding of my family, my history, and my place in it. The next morning, I knew what I had to do. I needed help. And I needed it fast. I dialed the number for a lawyer I'd found online, someone who specialized in family estate law and inheritance disputes. It felt like a necessary evil. I hated the idea of bringing a lawyer into something so personal, but there was no other choice. If my family was going to start playing dirty, then so was I. Hello, this is Rachel Carter, the voice on the other end of the phone said. How can I help you? I took a deep breath. Hi, my name is Claire Thompson. I'm dealing with a complicated family situation involving an inheritance, and I need legal advice. Rachel paused, and then her voice softened. Of course. I'd be happy to help. Can you tell me a bit more about the situation? I spent the next few minutes explaining the situation, the will, the deal my father had supposedly made with Ethan's father, the family's claims to the beach house, and when I was finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. Wow, Rachel finally said. It sounds like you've got a lot on your plate. I can certainly help you navigate this, but I need to warn you. Family disputes over property can get very ugly. You'll need to be prepared for what's ahead. I could feel the weight of her words. I understand. I don't want to lose the house. It was my father's legacy. It's the only connection I have left to him. Rachel was quiet for a moment. I get it. The emotional value of a property like that is irreplaceable. But we'll need to figure out the legal side first. I recommend we start by gathering all the documents related to the house, the will, any letters or communications your father may have had with Ethan's father. And we'll need to look into the specifics of your father's estate. I'll get everything together, I said, feeling a sense of relief. At least now I had a plan. A starting point. Good. I'll schedule a meeting for us as soon as you're ready, Rachel said. In the meantime, take a step back from the family and don't engage with anyone about this. It's better if they don't know you're getting legal counsel. It'll give you an advantage. I hung up the phone with a mix of anxiety and determination. I still had a long way to go, but for the first time in days, I felt like I was gaining some control. The beach house might not be mine for much longer, but I wasn't going down without a fight. That afternoon, I made another call. I wasn't sure who else I could turn to, but there was one person I could trust, someone who had always been in my corner, even when the rest of the family turned their backs. I dialed Kate's number. Kate had been my best friend since college. She was my sounding board, my confidant, and most importantly, she understood the dynamics of my family better than anyone else. She knew what it was like to have relatives who only cared about the material things, and she knew how to fight back when those same relatives tried to take what didn't belong to them. Kate, it's Claire, I said when she picked up. Hey, girl. How's it going? She asked, her upbeat tone making me smile for the first time in days. Not great, I said, my voice heavy with exhaustion. I need your help. My family's trying to take the beach house. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. What? Are you serious? I wish I weren't. Ethan showed up at the reunion, and now everyone's making a claim on it. They want it, Kate. And I don't know what to do. I thought that beach house was your thing, she said, her tone now serious. How can they just demand it? They think they have a right to it. My dad apparently promised it to Ethan's father before he passed. And I never knew about it. Oh my God. That's messed up, Kate said. So now they think they can just waltz in and take it? Exactly, I said, my voice cracking. I can't let them do that. But I don't know how to fight back. Kate's voice softened. First of all, don't panic. You're not alone in this. I've got your back. And I've been through enough family drama to know that when it comes to things like this, you have to play smart. I could feel a sense of calm settle over me as she spoke. What do? You get your lawyer on this, and you start documenting everything. And Claire, you have to be strategic. You can't let them see you sweat. If they think they have the upper hand, they'll run all over you. But if you stand your ground, you'll at least force them to think twice. I felt a small surge of confidence. I've already called a lawyer. I'm going to gather all the documents, everything I can find related to the house and the will. Then I'll meet with her to figure out what comes next. Good, Kate said. I'll be here every step of the way. And if you need me to come up there and keep an eye on things, just say the word. I'm in. Thank you, Kate, I said, the gratitude in my voice genuine. I really need you right now. Always, she said with a laugh. You've got this. We'll figure it out. As I hung up the phone, I felt something I hadn't in days: hope. I wasn't alone in this fight. Kate was right. I wasn't going to let them take the beach house without a fight. My father's legacy was mine to protect, and I was ready to do whatever it took to keep it. The days following my call with Kate felt like a whirlwind. I spent hours in my home office, sifting through old boxes of documents that I'd kept for years, everything from receipts for repairs to the beach house, to birthday cards from Dad, to the will itself. Nothing was too small or insignificant. Every scrap of paper had the potential to be a key piece of evidence. My fingers trembled as I went through everything, the reality of the situation sinking in deeper with each passing minute. I was no longer just holding on to memories. I was gathering ammunition. I had my first meeting with Rachel Carter, the lawyer, 2 days later. As soon as I walked into her office, I felt an overwhelming sense of professionalism that made my stomach turn. It was a sleek, glass-walled space in one of those shiny high-rise buildings that felt as far removed from my beach house as possible. It was cold, sterile, the kind of place where you didn't feel anything except the sharp edge of business. It felt like the place where families were torn apart over things like money and property, and that thought made my heart race. "Claire Thompson," Rachel called out from her desk as I entered. She was in her late 30s, sharp-featured, with dark hair pulled into a no-nonsense bun. She wore a black suit, something tailored to perfection, and exuded a quiet confidence that immediately made me feel like I was in the presence of someone who could handle anything. "Hi," I said, trying to force a smile, but my voice was shaky. "Thank you for meeting with me on such short notice." "No problem at all," Rachel replied, standing up and extending a hand. "I'm glad you reached out. I know you've got a lot to handle right now, and I want to make this as smooth as possible for you." I sat down in the chair opposite her, my stomach still in knots. She motioned for me to relax. "Let's go over the basics. You said your father made an agreement with Ethan's father regarding the beach house. Do we have any documentation of that agreement?" I paused, then shook my head. "No, I don't think so. Nothing formal, anyway. But I do have his will, and I've started going through all the old paperwork. I'm hoping that something in there can help us." Rachel nodded, her eyes thoughtful. "All right, let's start by going over the will. If there's any mention of this agreement in there, it will be crucial. If not, we'll look at the broader legal implications, such as ownership of the property and whether Ethan's father can truly make a claim." I handed her the folded-up pages of Dad's will. It was an old document, one I had only glanced at a handful of times before. When I had first read it, everything had seemed straightforward. But now, in the context of what I was facing, the words felt more like a ticking time bomb than anything else. Rachel scanned the pages quickly, and for a moment, I could have sworn I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Concern? Understanding? It was hard to tell. "Well," she said after a pause, "there's nothing here explicitly naming Ethan's father. However, there are references to some verbal agreements your father made. That's troubling. Verbal agreements are notoriously hard to prove, especially after someone has passed." I felt the blood drain from my face. "So, you're saying there's nothing I can do?" "No," Rachel replied calmly. "That's not what I'm saying. There's always a way forward, but it will be complicated. We'll need to start gathering all possible evidence. Any emails, letters, or other documents that might indicate your father's intentions. We'll also need to interview anyone who might have been privy to this so-called agreement." My mind raced. I'd already spoken to Ethan, and there was no way he was going to give me any documentation to back up his claims. But maybe there was someone else, someone in the family who had known about this deal. "I'm going to reach out to some of the family members," I said, feeling a sense of determination growing inside me. "I have a few ideas." Rachel gave me a small, understanding smile. "That's a good idea. The more information we can gather, the better. But I want to be clear about something. If this goes to court, it could get ugly. Families rarely walk away from property disputes without scars. Are you prepared for that?" I hesitated, my heart thudding in my chest. The idea of tearing my family apart, fighting them in a court of law, sickened me. But what choice did I have? I couldn't just let them take the house without a fight. Not after everything my father had worked for. I don't think I have any other choice, I said quietly. Rachel nodded solemnly. All right, then let's get to work. The next few days were filled with tense phone calls, messages, and sleepless nights. I reached out to everyone I could think of, my cousins, aunts, uncles, anyone who might have any recollection of what my father had said or done with regard to the beach house. Most of them seemed either unaware of the situation or unwilling to talk, but I managed to get a few leads. One of those leads came from my cousin Lily. She had always been the quiet one in the family, the one who stayed out of the drama, but she'd known Dad better than anyone else. I met her at a coffee shop 2 days later. She was already sitting at a table when I arrived, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. Her blonde hair fell in soft waves around her face, and she looked so much like my mother that it took my breath away. Hey, Lily, I said, taking a seat across from her. Hey, Claire. Thanks for calling. I know it's been a while, she said, her voice soft but warm. What's going on? You sounded upset. I hesitated, but then decided to tell her everything. About the beach house, about Ethan's revelation, about the fight that was coming. When I finished, Lily sat back in her chair, staring at me in disbelief. I had no idea, she said quietly. But I do remember something. My dad mentioned that Dad was worried about what would happen to the house after he was gone. I think he was talking about it with your mom. Do you know what he said? I asked, leaning forward. Lily shook her head slowly. No, he never really got into specifics. But maybe my mom remembers. She was there a lot in those final years. I'll ask her. That was the first glimmer of hope I'd had in days. If Lily's mom knew something, anything, that could help me, it could be the key I needed. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized the next few days were going to be critical. I needed to get ahead of the curve and find the truth before my family could use it against me. As I stood to leave, Lily grabbed my arm gently. Be careful, Claire. This isn't going to be easy. I know, I said. But I'll be damned if I let them take everything from me. The days following my conversation with Lily were filled with tension. I was no longer just battling my cousins and relatives for a piece of property. It had become about the family I thought I knew versus the people they had become in the face of greed. Every conversation I had felt like it could tip the scale, and every encounter with a family member left me wondering how much longer we could all pretend things were fine. It wasn't just about the beach house anymore. It was about loyalty, trust, family, and once those things began to unravel, there was no telling where it would end. I was sitting in my living room, going over documents when my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, and my stomach dropped. It was a message from Amanda. Amanda, we need to talk. Now. I paused for a moment. There was a time when Amanda and I would have had long phone calls about everything, gossiping, sharing secrets, and laughing about life. Now, every message from her felt like a threat. The idea that she might be coming for the beach house made my stomach turn. What was she thinking? I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I dialed Rachel's number. Rachel Carter, came the voice on the other end. It's Claire, I said. I just got a message from Amanda. She wants to talk. I have a feeling she's going to make her move soon. Don't let her pressure you into anything, Claire, Rachel warned. They'll try to play on your emotions, use your family ties against you. You need to stand firm. I know, I said, running a hand through my hair. I don't know if I can keep fighting them, Rachel. It feels like everything is falling apart. Not just the beach house. The whole family. That's the problem with family, Claire, Rachel said, her voice softer now. When money and property come into play, everything changes. But you have to keep your eyes on the bigger picture. The beach house is yours by right, and you can't let them take that from you. I took a deep breath. I won't. Rachel's tone became more businesslike. Good. But just remember, the moment you show weakness, they'll seize on it. You need to control the narrative. You have to be prepared for anything. I understand, I said, feeling more resolute. Thanks, Rachel. I hung up, trying to clear my mind, but the weight of everything was too much to ignore. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but I wasn't sure what to do next. That's when the phone buzzed again. Amanda, I'll be at the house in an hour. We need to talk face to face. There was no way I could let this happen. Not in person. Not with the emotional manipulation I knew she was capable of. I typed back, my fingers stiff on the keys. I'm not ready to have that conversation yet. Let's talk tomorrow over the phone. I hit send and immediately regretted it. Amanda was never one to back down, especially when it came to getting her way. I could already hear her voice in my head, demanding to meet and forcing me to confront her, whether I was prepared or not. An hour later, as the clock ticked closer to the time when Amanda was supposed to show up, I sat on the couch, staring at the door, my mind racing. Part of me wanted to run, to escape, to go anywhere but here. But I knew I couldn't do that. Not when everything I had left was on the line. My phone rang, and I didn't even have to look at the screen to know who it was. It was Amanda. I answered with a deep breath. Amanda. Her voice was sweet, but there was an edge beneath it. Claire, darling, I just want to talk. You don't have to be so defensive. I was silent for a moment, trying to control my emotions. I don't think this conversation is going to go the way you expect it to. Oh, I think it's going to go exactly the way I expect, she replied, her voice a little too smooth. But don't worry, Claire. I'm not here to fight you. I just want to understand where you're coming from. I couldn't help the frustration that bubbled up inside me. You want to understand where I'm coming from? You and the rest of the family have already decided what's mine, and now you're trying to convince me it's all for the best. She laughed softly, almost mockingly. I don't know what you're talking about. All I'm saying is that we should be thinking about what's best for the family. That beach house could be better used for all of us. We need to share it, Claire. We should be united. My jaw tightened. You mean you need to have access to it, right? Don't act like this is about family. You've never cared about the family. It's about the money. It's always been about the money. The line went silent for a moment, and I could almost hear her stewing on the other end. You're making this so much harder than it needs to be, Claire. But fine. If you want to be difficult, then we'll do this the hard way. I hung up before she could say anything else, my heart racing. The truth was, Amanda had never been interested in family unity. She had always been interested in getting what she wanted, and now she was looking to turn every single relative against me. But it wasn't just Amanda. I could feel the divide growing in the family, and it wasn't just about the beach house anymore. I was starting to see how deep the cracks went. The reunion had been a perfect example. It wasn't just the cousins and uncles who were looking at me with disdain. It was the subtle looks of judgment from my aunts, the whispers behind my back, and the passive-aggressive comments that were now becoming more and more frequent. Even Lily, my cousin, who had once been the quietest member of the family, seemed to be torn. One minute she was offering help, and the next she was pulling back, unsure of whose side she should be on. It was clear she didn't want to get involved in this mess, but she also didn't want to lose her standing within the family. It was the kind of situation that was creating cracks in every relationship, and I wasn't sure who I could trust anymore. That night, I lay awake in bed, staring up at the ceiling. The beach house felt like it was slipping further and further away. With every phone call, every conversation, every whisper, I could feel my family slipping through my fingers. But I wasn't going to let them win. No matter how divided we became, no matter how much they tried to turn each other against me, I was going to fight for what was mine. I had to. The beach house wasn't just a house. It was everything that remained of my father, everything I had left of my childhood. And I wasn't about to let them take it from me. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The days following my tense phone call with Amanda were filled with an overwhelming sense of dread. It seemed like every time I picked up the phone, there was another family member wanting to make their case for why the beach house should be theirs, or worse, why it should be sold. The constant pressure was starting to feel like a never-ending storm, and I didn't know how much longer I could weather it without cracking. But just when I thought things couldn't get worse, I got a message that would change everything. It was from my Aunt Marianne, my father's younger sister. I hadn't spoken to her much in recent years. She was always the quieter, more reserved one in the family, preferring to stay out of the drama. But there was something in the tone of her message that caught my attention. She had something important to tell me. Aunt Marianne, we need to talk. I know things are tense right now, but I have some information that might help you. I read the message twice, trying to make sense of it. What did she know? Was she finally willing to speak up about the situation with the beach house? My mind raced as I stared at the blinking cursor, but I didn't hesitate long before I replied. When can we meet? An hour later, we were sitting in the quiet corner of a small cafe, the soft hum of conversation around us the only sound breaking the silence between us. Aunt Marianne was sipping her coffee slowly, her expression unreadable. It was the same face I'd seen so many times growing up, calm, composed, and always just a little distant. But today, there was something different in her eyes. Something guarded. "Claire," she said softly, her voice low, as though she didn't want anyone around to overhear. "I know you're in the middle of all this, and I've been watching it unfold. I think you deserve to know something I should have told you sooner." I leaned forward, my heart starting to race. "What do you mean?" Aunt Marianne took another sip of her coffee before setting the cup down gently. "Your father wasn't as naive as everyone thinks. He knew what he was doing with that beach house. And he knew it was going to be a point of contention one day. I didn't want to say anything before, but now. I think you need to know the truth." I swallowed hard. "What truth?" She hesitated, glancing around as though making sure no one was eavesdropping, before continuing. "I don't know the full details, but I remember a conversation he had with me a few weeks before he passed. He was worried about Ethan's father, about what he might try to do once he was gone." I froze. "What did he say about Ethan's father?" Aunt Marianne looked at me seriously. "He said that Ethan's father was entitled to nothing, that he had no legal claim to the house. But he also said something else, something that I didn't quite understand at the time. He said that if anything ever happened to him, you were to protect the house. That you were the one who needed to stand firm." I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but it was quickly followed by a surge of anger. "Why didn't you tell me this sooner?" "I didn't want to get involved, Claire," she said quietly. "I've seen what happens when family gets caught up in these things. It tears people apart. But now I see you're fighting alone, and I can't sit by and watch that happen." I took a deep breath, the weight of her words sinking in. My father had known about the possibility of this dispute. He had trusted me to stand my ground. But what did that mean for the future of the beach house? Was it really just a matter of standing firm, or was there more to it? "Is there anything else I need to know?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Aunt Marianne looked down, tapping her fingers nervously against the side of her coffee cup. "There might be something, but I don't know if it will help. There was a document, something your father asked me to keep safe. It's not in the will, but I know where it is." My heart skipped a beat. "What kind of document?" "I don't know exactly," she replied, her eyes narrowing as if she were trying to remember something long buried. "It was a letter, I think. Something about the house. Your father didn't want it to be found until after his death. He made me swear to keep it a secret. But I think now's the time. I'll get it for you." "Where is it?" I asked urgently. She hesitated, then looked at me seriously. "I'll need to go home to get it. It's locked in my study. I'll contact you later tonight." I nodded, unable to hide my sense of anticipation. This was it. If this document contained what I thought it did, it could be the proof I needed to make my case. It could be the key to everything. As I left the cafe, my mind was racing. Aunt Marianne had always been the quiet one, the one who kept to herself. But now I was starting to understand just how deep the ties ran within the family. Even though it seemed like everyone was turning against me, there were people who were secretly on my side, people who wanted to help me fight for what was rightfully mine. As the evening stretched on, I couldn't stop thinking about the possibilities. Could this document be the evidence I needed to expose the truth about my father's wishes? Could it be the weapon I needed to fight off Ethan and the rest of my family? By the time I received Aunt Marianne's message later that night, I was on edge, barely able to sit still. She had sent the letter, but it came with a warning. Aunt Marianne, I found the document. But Claire, you need to be careful. It's not just about the beach house. There are things in there that could change everything. I had no idea what she meant, but I knew one thing for sure. The battle was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The moment Aunt Marianne's message came through, I felt a mix of excitement and dread. I had been anticipating the arrival of this document for days, but now that it was in my hands, I was hesitant to open it. What if it was just more legal jargon, more paperwork that would only make the situation more complicated? What if it was another reminder of how powerless I was in the face of my family's demands? I tried to shake off the nerves and sat down at the kitchen table, the yellow light from the lamp above casting a warm glow over the envelope that now lay before me. It was simple, nothing extravagant, just a plain manila envelope. But to me, it felt like the weight of my father's entire legacy was resting inside it. This could be the turning point I'd been waiting for, the key to saving my father's beloved beach house. I took a deep breath, then carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a single piece of paper, slightly worn at the edges. It was a letter, written in my father's familiar handwriting. I recognized it immediately. His handwriting had always been distinctive, neat, yet hurried in a way that suggested he had always been in a rush. As I began reading, my heart started pounding in my chest. Dear Claire, if you're reading this, then something has happened to me. I don't know what the future holds, but I want you to know that the beach house is yours, and it always has been. You've always been the one who cared about it the most, and I have no doubt that you will protect it from anyone who would try to take it from you. But there's more to this than just ownership. This house is special not just because of its memories, but because it is a part of our family's history. The land it sits on, the views it offers, and the moments we've shared there are priceless. But there are some things you need to know, Claire. Some truths that weren't easy for me to say aloud. There is a clause in the deed, hidden beneath layers of paperwork, that protects this house from being sold or divided without unanimous consent from the family. You are the only one who can invoke it, and no one else, especially not Ethan or his father, can take it from you. But this clause isn't just a legal safeguard, it's a moral one too. If anyone tries to take this house away from you, they'll be going against everything this family is supposed to stand for. I know this will be difficult, but you must stand firm, Claire. You are the guardian of this house now. Don't let anyone twist the truth or manipulate you into giving it up. Protect it, not just for you, but for the future of this family. I trust you more than anyone. Love, Dad. I read the letter again. And again. And then I stared at it as if waiting for it to change. The words felt like a weight lifting off my chest and a burden settling in its place. I had always known my father loved the beach house, but I had no idea how far he had gone to protect it. The deed, the clause hidden in the paperwork, and the fact that he had entrusted me with this responsibility, it was more than I had ever expected. It wasn't just about ownership. It was about legacy. And my father had made it clear that I was the one who needed to protect it. My mind was racing. This was the kind of evidence I needed to shut down Ethan's claims, to prove that my father had planned for this very scenario. But I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. What if my family didn't care about this clause? What if they simply wanted the house for themselves, regardless of what my father had written? I thought back to my conversation with Aunt Marianne. She hadn't just handed over this letter, she had warned me. She had said that there were things in here that could change everything. But what could she have meant? What other secrets did my father leave behind? The phone rang, cutting through my thoughts. I jumped, startled by the sudden noise. I quickly glanced at the screen. It was Rachel. "Claire," she said, her voice urgent, as soon as I picked up. "I've been going over everything we've discussed. Your dad's wishes, the beach house, the legal stuff, and I think we might have an advantage here." "What do you mean?" I asked, my heart pounding as I picked up the letter again, gripping it tightly in my hands. "There's more to the deed than just that clause. It's not just about the beach house," Rachel continued. "The clause in the deed also affects the land surrounding the house. Whoever holds ownership of the property holds significant influence over that entire area, including potential development rights." My mind raced. Development rights? What was she talking about? "You're saying it's worth more than just the house?" I asked, the pieces starting to fall into place. "Yes," she confirmed. "If Ethan's father or anyone else tries to take it, they won't just be getting a house. They'll have control over something much more valuable, land that's been untouched and could be developed into something much bigger. That's the real reason they want it. Not just the house, but the land." A wave of realization hit me. It was never about the beach house for them, it was about what it could become. A prime piece of property that could be sold to developers, turned into a luxury resort, or transformed into something that would line their pockets with money. I looked at the letter again, my heart pounding in my chest. My father had known this. He had known how much the house and the land it sat on was worth. And now it all made sense. They weren't just after a vacation home. They were after a gold mine. "Claire, you need to be careful." Rachel's voice brought me back to reality. "This isn't just a family dispute anymore. There's real money at stake, and there are people who will do anything to get their hands on it." I knew she was right. But I couldn't back down. Not now. Not after everything my father had left me. "Thank you, Rachel," I said, my voice firm. "I won't let them take it. Not now, not ever." I hung up the phone, my hands shaking slightly as I looked down at the letter once more. The truth had been revealed, and now I had the power to fight back. But I wasn't just fighting for the house. I was fighting for everything my family had worked for, everything they had built. And no matter what it took, I was going to protect it. The day after my conversation with Rachel, everything felt different. The weight of my father's letter had settled into the pit of my stomach, but with it came a sense of determination I hadn't known I possessed. I wasn't just going to let Ethan or anyone else take what was rightfully mine. Not anymore. The revelation about the land, the development potential, had turned this entire dispute into something far bigger than I had ever imagined. It wasn't just about the beach house anymore. The stakes had risen. But while I was steeling myself for the fight ahead, a new problem loomed on the horizon. A threat I hadn't even considered. And this time, it wasn't just about the people I knew. It was about those I didn't. That morning, I received an email. The subject line was simple: the beach house. I didn't recognize the sender, but the message was clear. "Claire, we understand that you are currently in possession of the deed to the beach house. We are the legal representatives of some of your family's distant relatives who believe they hold a stake in the property. We will be in touch shortly to discuss the next steps. Regards, Lawrence and Associates, Legal Counsel." The email was short, formal, and to the point. But it left my mind reeling. Distant relatives? Who were they talking about? I had always known the family was large, but I had never heard of anyone claiming a stake in the beach house, especially not outside the immediate family. I felt a chill run through me as I read the email again. My first instinct was to disregard it. This had to be some kind of mistake, or worse, a scam. But something about the formality of the message made me hesitate. I wasn't about to dismiss it outright. I picked up my phone and dialed Rachel. The call barely rang before she answered. "Claire, what's going on?" she asked, her voice steady but curious. "I just got an email from a law firm. They claim to represent distant relatives who have a stake in the property." "I don't even know who they are," I said, my voice tight with frustration. Rachel was silent for a beat. "Are you sure it's legitimate?" "I don't know. It seems professional enough, but it just came out of nowhere. I sighed. I thought it was just Ethan and his dad I had to worry about, but now it seems like there might be more people involved. This is getting out of hand. Claire, I don't want to alarm you, but this could be serious, Rachel said, her voice serious now. If they're really related to your father, they could have a claim. We need to look into this more. I need to find out who these people are and what they think they're entitled to, I said, my frustration growing. This is ridiculous. I'm just trying to keep the house that was left to me, and now it's like everyone's coming out of the woodwork. Listen, Rachel said, her voice calming. You've got this. You know the truth, and you've got the deed on your side. But we need to be smart about this. Let's take this one step at a time. I'll help you research these relatives, but you need to stay grounded. If they've got any legitimacy to their claims, we'll figure it out. I hung up with Rachel's reassurances still echoing in my mind. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much bigger, something I wasn't prepared for. That afternoon, I spent hours going through my father's old papers, trying to find anything that might provide a clue about these so-called relatives. I couldn't help but feel a sense of betrayal. Was there really a group of people out there who could suddenly come forward and claim what my father had left to me? It didn't seem possible. Then I found something. A yellowing envelope tucked behind a stack of old tax documents. It had my father's name written on the front, along with the words, "To be opened in the event of my passing." I felt a knot tighten in my chest as I carefully opened the envelope, trying not to tear the fragile paper inside. There, written in my father's unmistakable script, was a letter. Dear Claire, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer around to explain things to you in person. I know this won't be easy, but I've always tried to be upfront with you, even if the truth was hard to hear. I've kept the family's history close to my chest, but it's time for you to know the truth about some relatives who might show up in the future. There are people, distant relatives, some of whom you might not even recognize, who believe they have a claim to this beach house and possibly more. They are not entitled to it, but they may try to argue otherwise. There's a lot of money involved in this property, Claire, and people who want it are willing to go to great lengths to take it from you. I never wanted to put this burden on you, but you need to be ready for anything. These relatives may come out of the woodwork, claiming they have a stake. Some of them have been distant for years, but their desire for control over this property could be strong. I've set up legal safeguards, but you need to trust your instincts. If they come knocking, don't let them manipulate you. The house is yours, and I've made sure of that. But the fight may not be easy. Love, Dad. I reread the letter, my mind reeling. So, it wasn't just Ethan and his father. My father had anticipated this. He had known that there were distant relatives who might try to claim the house. And now, they were making their move. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. This was more than a family dispute now. It was a full-on legal battle, and I was in the middle of it. I had prepared for a fight against my immediate family, but I hadn't anticipated this level of complexity. These distant relatives weren't just coming out of nowhere. They were part of a larger, hidden web of people who believed they had a stake in the beach house. The truth was clear. The beach house wasn't just a family heirloom. It was a battleground. And now, more than ever, I had to stand firm. I couldn't let anyone take it from me, not Ethan, not his father, and certainly not these new relatives who seemed to be appearing from the shadows. The email I had received earlier in the day wasn't the end of it. It was only the beginning. The very next morning, I was awakened by a knock on my door. It was early, far too early for my liking, but the sharp knock repeated itself with a persistence that could only mean one thing: someone was determined to get my attention. I rolled out of bed and pulled on a robe, my feet dragging against the cold floor as I approached the door. I wasn't expecting visitors, especially not at this hour. When I opened it, I was met by a man in a sharply tailored suit. His briefcase was polished, his shoes gleamed with an almost unsettling shine, and his face was expressionless, stoic, in fact. "Miss Claire Matthews?" he asked, his voice formal and almost rehearsed. That's me. Can I help you? I asked, trying to hide the growing sense of dread in my chest. The man's presence was as uncomfortable as his perfectly starched collar. I'm Roger Harris, representing Lawrence and Associates. We've been in touch with you about the matter concerning your family's beach house. His eyes seemed to scan me for a reaction, but I kept my face neutral. I've brought the official legal documents to move forward with our claim. I felt my heart drop. It wasn't a phone call or email this time. This was in person, formal, confrontational, real. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my composure as I stepped aside to let him in. He handed me a thick stack of papers, the smell of fresh ink hitting me immediately. We've reviewed the situation, and after careful consideration, we believe that the house is part of a family trust that includes several distant relatives. As per the terms outlined in the documents, these relatives are entitled to a portion of the property. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. But the house was left to me, I said, trying to stay calm. My father's will. Yes, we're aware of your father's will, Harris interrupted, unfazed. But the beach house is also tied to an additional set of family trusts that include several people outside your immediate family. Those relatives have now come forward, asserting their rights. I felt the anger bubble up in me. This was happening. It wasn't a scam or a misunderstanding. This man, this law firm, was here to take what was mine. What relatives? I demanded, my voice barely controlled. Who are they? That information will be disclosed in due time, Harris said, his tone dismissive. For now, we're proceeding with the legal process to ensure the property is divided fairly. I gritted my teeth. Fairly? My father left the house to me. How is that fair? This is not for you to decide, Ms. Matthews. Our clients have a legitimate claim, and we intend to honor their rights. The man's cold, impersonal demeanor made my blood boil. He wasn't here to negotiate or understand the situation. He was here to collect. The wheels of the legal machine were already turning, and now I was caught in their relentless gears. Before I could say anything more, he turned to leave. You'll be hearing from our office soon, Ms. Matthews. Please consider your next steps carefully. This matter will be handled in the courts. With that, he was gone. The door slammed shut behind him, leaving me standing there, holding the stack of legal papers in my hands like a ticking bomb. My father's beach house, the one place I thought was safe from everything, was now the epicenter of a legal battle that I never asked for. I sank onto the couch, staring at the papers. The words on the pages blurred as my mind raced. How had I gotten here? My father's careful planning, his letters, everything he had done to ensure the beach house stayed in the family. It all felt like it was crumbling before my eyes. Now I was up against a team of lawyers, and I had no idea who these distant relatives were or what their next move would be. I reached for my phone and immediately dialed Rachel. It rang for several seconds before she picked up. Claire, what happened? She asked, sounding concerned. They came to my door, I said, barely able to hold back the anger in my voice. They dropped off legal papers. They're claiming the beach house is part of a family trust and that these distant relatives have a right to it. They're going to court. Rachel was silent for a moment. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but this is worse than I thought. Do you know who these relatives are? No, I don't. They wouldn't tell me, I said, frustration seeping into my words. All they said was that they're entitled to a portion of the property. I don't even know if they're real relatives or if they're just trying to scare me. Okay, listen, Rachel said, taking a deep breath. We need to get ahead of this. First, we'll need to confirm who these people are. I'll help you track them down, but we need to be careful. This is going to get ugly. I don't have time to waste, Rachel, I said, my voice hard. I'm not going to let them take my father's house. I know, Claire. But you need to be strategic. If these people have any legal standing, we need to know exactly who they are and what they're after. We can't just rush in blind. I took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. You're right. I can't just fight this without knowing everything. But I'm not backing down. Not now. Good. I'll start researching these distant relatives, Rachel said. In the meantime, don't make any hasty decisions. The more information we have, the better chance we have of winning. I ended the call and sat in silence for a few moments, my fingers tracing the edges of the legal documents in my hands. The battle had officially begun, and I had no idea how long it would last. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just a legal dispute anymore. This was a fight for everything my father had left me. The beach house wasn't just a home. It was a symbol of everything I had fought for in my life. I wasn't going to let these strangers take it from me. Not without a fight. The courtroom was cold, icy in its silence, and the air was thick with tension. It had been a week since Roger Harris's visit, and now I found myself standing in front of a judge, surrounded by a sea of lawyers, each one eager to argue their side. My stomach churned with nervous energy, but I tried to hide it behind a calm exterior. This was only the beginning, but I was determined not to show any weakness. I wasn't sure what I had expected from the first hearing, but the reality was far more daunting. The vastness of the legal system, the sterile atmosphere, the sharp-eyed lawyers who seemed to be sizing me up, it was overwhelming. My heart pounded in my chest, and I forced myself to focus on the task ahead. At the table in front of me, Roger Harris sat with his colleagues, their expressions unreadable. He glanced over at me briefly, offering a quick, almost imperceptible smile that made my blood boil. He was enjoying this, every moment of it. I was just another pawn in his well-oiled machine. Across the aisle, I spotted Rachel sitting beside me. Her presence was the only thing that kept me grounded. She squeezed my hand lightly, offering a reassuring smile, though I could see the worry in her eyes. "You're doing great," she whispered. I nodded, trying to steady my breath. This wasn't a fight for me alone anymore. It was a fight for everything I had left. This beach house had been a symbol of my family's history, my father's legacy. And I wasn't about to let it slip through my fingers without a fight. The judge, an older man with graying hair and a deep-set frown, entered the room, signaling for everyone to rise. He took his seat and adjusted his glasses before glancing over at both sides. "Ms. Matthews," he began, his voice deep and authoritative, "I understand there's a legal dispute concerning the property located at 342 Bayside Drive. This hearing will determine the validity of the claims made by the opposing party regarding their stake in said property." I felt my pulse quicken at the mention of the house. It was as if the words hung in the air, charged with the weight of everything that was at stake. The opposing side, Harris's team, was the first to speak. He stood and addressed the court, his voice smooth and confident, like he had done this 1,000 times before. "Your Honor, we represent a group of distant relatives of Ms. Matthews's late father," he said, glancing in my direction with a slight sneer. "We are here to assert that, contrary to the claims of Ms. Matthews, the property in question is not solely hers. It is part of a larger family trust that involves several individuals who are entitled to a share of the property." The words sent a shockwave through my chest. A family trust? I had heard rumors of some distant relatives in my father's past, but never in my wildest dreams did I think they would come out of the woodwork to claim something that wasn't theirs. My mind spun with the implications. How far would they go? How could they possibly have a legitimate claim when my father's will clearly left everything to me? The judge nodded slowly, as though processing the information, before turning his attention to me. "Ms. Matthews," he said, his voice softer but still authoritative, "you've heard the claims made by the opposing counsel. How do you respond?" I stood up, my legs feeling like they might give out beneath me, but I held my ground. Rachel gave my hand another squeeze, and I took a deep breath before speaking. "Your Honor," I began, my voice steady but not without emotion. "I don't deny that there are people out there who claim to be related to my father, but the fact is that my father left me the beach house in his will. I have the deed. The beach house was his, and it was his wish that I would inherit it." I paused for a moment, gathering my thoughts. I'm not here to fight anyone's family, but I will fight for what my father left me. I believe that these claims are based on nothing more than opportunism. The house is mine, and I will not let anyone take it from me. The room seemed to hold its breath. I felt the weight of everyone's eyes on me, but I refused to falter. This was my fight, and I wasn't going to let it slip away. The judge turned his gaze to the opposing side. "Mr. Harris," he said, his voice carrying a note of finality, "you've heard the response. Do you have any further evidence to support your claim?" Harris smiled, though it was a cold, calculated smile. He pulled a thick folder from his briefcase and handed it to the court clerk, who passed it to the judge. "We have documents that show the existence of a family trust that includes Ms. Matthews's father's assets, including the property at Bayside Drive," he said. "We will be filing these as evidence and requesting further hearings to explore the validity of the claims." The judge nodded as he skimmed through the papers. "We will schedule another hearing to review the documents and hear further testimony. In the meantime, I advise both parties to continue with their legal preparations." I felt a cold knot in my stomach. Another hearing? More waiting? It was clear that Harris was in no rush to settle this. This wasn't about resolving the issue, it was about wearing me down, pushing me to give up. The judge banged his gavel, signaling the end of the hearing. "This case is adjourned until further notice. I will be in touch regarding the next steps." I sat back down, my heart racing. Rachel leaned over and whispered in my ear, "You did well, but we need to prepare for a long fight." "I know," I said, my voice tight, "but I won't give up. Not now." As we gathered our things and walked out of the courtroom, the weight of the situation settled in. The legal battle had just begun, and I had no idea how long it would last. But one thing was certain, I wasn't about to let go of the beach house without a fight. Not while I still had a chance. It had only been a few days since the first hearing, but it felt like weeks. Every moment that passed dragged me further into a pit of uncertainty, and the thought of the beach house slipping through my fingers was enough to keep me awake at night. But there was no time for doubt or weakness. I needed answers, and fast. Rachel had been working tirelessly to help me track down any information on the family trust Harris had mentioned. It was strange. I had always known my father's side of the family to be relatively small and straightforward. The thought that there could be a separate, secretive trust involving distant relatives I barely knew, or never knew at all, was something I just couldn't wrap my head around. The only thing I knew for sure was that if there was a family trust, it was my duty to understand it completely. I couldn't just sit back and let Harris and his team bury me in paperwork and legal jargon. I had to fight fire with fire. One afternoon, as I sat at the kitchen table, reviewing the stack of documents Harris had left me, I heard the sound of my phone vibrating. It was Rachel. "Claire, I found something," she said, her voice full of urgency. I sat up straighter. "What did you find?" "I got a copy of your father's will," she said, almost too quickly. "It's not the one we've been looking at. It's the one from a few years before his death. I think it's the key to understanding the trust and the relatives who are claiming the house." I couldn't believe it. I had thought we had seen every piece of paper that my father had ever signed, but now it seemed like there was one more layer to peel back. "You've got the will?" "Yeah. It's a bit complicated, but I'm going through it now. We need to meet." I stood up without hesitation, grabbing my keys. "Where?" "Meet me at my office in an hour." "This is big, Claire. Trust me." An hour later, I found myself sitting across from Rachel at her small, cluttered office, surrounded by stacks of legal books and paperwork. It smelled like coffee and dust, and the air felt thick with tension. She handed me a thick manila folder, the edges slightly worn from years of handling. "This is it," she said, leaning forward. "The will I found was written when your father was in his late 50s. It's not the one we thought was the final one, but it's critical. This will contains the creation of a trust that was set up to distribute his assets to certain individuals, and it includes a specific mention of your beach house." I flipped through the pages quickly, my heart racing. The will was dated a full 10 years before my father's passing. The language was legalese, But what caught my eye was a clause toward the end of the document. It outlined the creation of a family trust, a large portion of which was to be used to provide for several distant relatives. The clause specifically mentioned the beach house, noting that it was a shared asset among the trust beneficiaries. My stomach churned. This wasn't what I expected. It wasn't just a simple matter of inheritance anymore. It was an entire trust with rules and conditions that I hadn't even known existed. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of legal jargon and family secrets. Rachel must have seen the shock on my face, because she reached across the table, placing a hand on mine. Take a breath, Claire. There's more. Your father had a second will that he wrote years later, just before his death. The second will revoked this one, but it didn't address the trust explicitly. It only mentions the house. Wait, so if this is the case, why didn't the second will mention the trust? I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Why wasn't this all spelled out more clearly? Rachel exhaled slowly. I think your father thought the trust was ironclad, but it's possible he never fully understood the implications of it. Or maybe he didn't want to stir the pot by changing too much, given that he was still close to some of these distant relatives. I felt a sharp pang in my chest. So, what does this mean for me? Can they really take the house? Rachel nodded grimly. The trust could give them a valid claim, depending on how the judge interprets the language. It's complicated, but we need to get in front of this. If we don't contest the validity of this trust now, those distant relatives could win. I stared down at the will, my mind reeling. The weight of the decision pressed down on me like a 1,000-pound anchor. If I didn't act quickly, if I didn't fight hard enough, I might lose everything. Not just the beach house, but the last connection I had to my father's legacy. So, what's the next step? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. We need to dig deeper into the trust, Rachel said, her voice taking on a determined edge. I'll reach out to a few legal experts, but we need to get copies of the trust documents. I'll also do some research on the relatives who stand to benefit from this trust. Once we know exactly who they are, we can start formulating a strategy. I nodded, feeling a sense of clarity starting to emerge amid the chaos. I want to know everything, who they are, where they came from, and how they plan to make their claim. If they think they can take my house, they're in for a rude awakening. Rachel smiled, a glint of admiration in her eyes. That's the spirit. We're going to fight this, Claire. We'll get to the bottom of it. I spent the next few days buried in research, my eyes growing tired from hours spent combing through old records and family documents. But I wasn't about to let up. The more I uncovered, the more determined I became. Rachel kept me updated, and together, we learned more about the distant relatives who had come forward. They were scattered across the country, distant cousins with little to no contact with my father for decades. Some had never even met him in person. It was almost laughable that they were now staking a claim in the beach house. But the more I thought about it, the angrier I became. These people, whoever they were, had no right to tear apart what my father had worked so hard for. I wasn't about to let them take it without a fight. The old family tree stretched before me on paper, its branches messy and entangled, each line representing a connection to someone I barely knew or hadn't known at all. I stared at the dense scrawl of names, dates, and relationships, my mind trying to make sense of the tangled web that connected my father to people I'd only heard about in passing, if at all. Rachel had been working overtime, reaching out to genealogists, legal experts, and distant relatives who might have had insight into my father's past. Each call, each document we uncovered, made things even more complicated. My father had always been a man of few words when it came to family, which meant I had a lot of catching up to do. It wasn't just about legal battles anymore, it was personal. Every name I saw, every name that connected to the beach house and the trust, felt like a crack in the foundation of the life I had built. It was as if my father's past was coming back to haunt me, and I was left picking up the pieces. I stood up from my desk, rubbing my tired eyes. I needed a break. The small office that Rachel had set up for me was beginning to feel like a prison. The walls were closing in with all the legal files, family trees, and maps of property lines. But I couldn't afford to stop. Not now. I called Rachel, my fingers tapping anxiously on the edge of my desk. I need to know everything. I need to know about these relatives, who they are, what they've done, and why they think they have any claim to the house. Rachel's voice came through the phone, sounding as weary as I felt. I've been going through the family tree we got from the genealogist. Some of these relatives go back generations, Claire. You have cousins who are scattered all over the country, some of them in places you wouldn't even believe. A lot of them were involved in the family business your father built up. But there are also some names you might not recognize at all. There's a lot of gaps. Gaps? I repeated, my heart sinking. What kind of gaps? There are records that just aren't there, she explained, her voice low. It's like parts of your father's history were intentionally hidden. Some of these relatives didn't even know about the beach house until recently. But it seems like someone found out, and now they're coming out of the woodwork, claiming what they think is theirs. I felt a wave of anger rising inside me, but I pushed it down. This wasn't the time to lose control. I need you to keep digging. Whatever it takes, Rachel. I'm not going to let these people come in and take what's mine. Rachel sighed on the other end of the line. I know, Claire. I know. But we need to tread carefully. Some of these relatives could have legitimate claims. If we don't play this right, we might just give them more ammunition against you. Fine, I snapped, my patience wearing thin. But I want results. The sooner we figure this out, the better. I can't afford to wait any longer. Okay, Rachel said, her tone softening. I'll keep going. I promise we'll get to the bottom of this. As the days passed, the family tree began to make more sense, but it was far from simple. The web of relationships had grown far more intricate than I ever could have imagined. My father's mother, who had passed away when I was young, had been married twice. The second marriage brought in a number of step-siblings, some of whom had children. They were the ones claiming the beach house now, even though they had never been a part of our family life. One name kept popping up in the records, Harold Matthews. According to the genealogist, Harold was a cousin of my father's who had lived on the East Coast and was largely estranged from the family. He had been wealthy in his own right, but according to some of the records, he had a deep grudge against my father. I couldn't understand why this Harold Matthews would want to be involved in claiming the beach house now, but his name came up repeatedly in both the trust documents and the court filings. My mind kept circling back to Harold. Who was he? What was his connection to the trust? I'd heard stories about family rifts, but nothing ever seemed serious enough to warrant a long-standing feud. What had happened between them? And why was he so determined to claim what was mine now? I decided to get answers, even if it meant reaching out to some of these distant relatives. I couldn't sit idly by and let the situation unfold without understanding the full picture. The first call I made was to Harold's son, Greg Matthews. I didn't know him, but I found his name listed in the genealogical records Rachel had uncovered. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I hoped that speaking to someone in the family might give me some insight into their intentions. Greg answered the phone on the second ring, his voice smooth and calm. Hello, Mr. Matthews? I said, trying to keep my voice steady. This is Claire Matthews. I believe you're related to my father. I'm reaching out to talk about the ongoing legal case regarding the beach house. There was a pause on the other end of the line before Greg spoke again. Claire Matthews. Yes, I know who you are. I must admit, I didn't expect to hear from you. I'm trying to understand what's going on, I said, my voice firm. You and your family are claiming the beach house as part of a trust. Can you explain to me what exactly the connection is? Greg let out a soft chuckle. Well, it's a bit complicated, but I suppose that's why we're in court, right? Let's just say my father and your father weren't exactly close, but there was still a lot of unresolved business when it came to that beach house. I don't know what you've been told, but there are a few things about the trust that you might not know. Maybe you should look a little deeper. His words were cryptic, but they only made me more determined to get to the bottom of it. I was no longer just fighting for a property. I was fighting to uncover the truth about my father's relationships, his legacy, and the secrets that had been hidden for too long. "I'll be looking deeper," I said, my voice colder now. "And I'll find out everything." The line went silent for a moment before Greg responded. "I'd be careful, Claire. You might not like what you find." His words lingered in the air like a warning, but I wasn't about to back down. I didn't know whether to be angry or to feel a chill run down my spine after my conversation with Greg Matthews. The cryptic warning echoed in my head as I paced back and forth in the living room, feeling trapped inside a web of secrets I hadn't asked to be caught in. The more I uncovered, the more the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together, albeit in ways I hadn't expected. Rachel had called shortly after my conversation with Greg, and I filled her in on the strange exchange. She wasn't surprised by Greg's behavior. In fact, she expected him to be evasive. But something about his tone, the way he casually dropped that last line, unsettled me. What could he possibly know about my father's past that I didn't? And why was he so intent on making it sound like I was digging in the wrong place? I knew what I had to do next. The trust, the relatives, the hidden will, it was all connected. But how? And what was it that my father had kept hidden for so long? Rachel and I decided it was time to take a different approach. We couldn't rely on the public records alone, nor could we trust the family members who had a vested interest in claiming the beach house. It was clear that my father had been a master at keeping things under wraps, and it seemed like he had intentionally left a trail of false leads. I needed to get access to his private correspondence. Letters, old phone records, anything that could shed light on his relationships with these relatives. If there was a secret I wasn't privy to, this was the way to uncover it. Rachel got to work on tracking down any private papers that could be of use, and I began making arrangements to go through my father's old study, which had been untouched since his death. It was a risk. I knew that there could be more personal documents buried in there, things I might not want to know. But it was a risk I had to take. The beach house wasn't just a piece of property to me, it was my connection to my father, and I wasn't about to let it slip away without understanding the full story. The study was in the same house my father had lived in for the last decade of his life, a place that had always felt like an extension of him. The moment I stepped inside, the familiar scent of old books and leather hit me. It felt like he was still there, watching over me, though I knew that wasn't possible. I went to the desk first, where I had spent countless hours as a child, sitting in his lap while he worked. The drawers were locked, but I had the key. My fingers shook as I inserted it, the sound of the lock clicking echoing in the otherwise silent room. Inside the drawer, I found a stack of envelopes, each with handwritten addresses from places I didn't recognize. Most were from various law firms, but one stood out. A plain envelope with no return address, only my father's name scrawled in his familiar handwriting. My heart skipped a beat. I carefully opened it, my hands trembling as I unfolded the letter inside. It was brief, almost too simple. "I've made my decision. It's time to settle things once and for all. The beach house belongs to her. There's no other way. I'm sorry, but it's the only way to make things right." There were no signatures, no identifying marks, and it was dated only a few months before his death. My throat tightened as I reread the letter. The beach house belongs to her. Was he talking about me? Had he known about the potential claim against the house from these distant relatives? Had he left me a final message telling me that the beach house was rightfully mine? My thoughts raced, and I started sifting through the rest of the envelopes, hoping for some additional clue. There was nothing else. No more letters from that mysterious source. But this letter was enough to confirm something I had long suspected. My father had made plans for the house. He had made a decision about the legacy, but he had left no explicit instructions about the trust itself. What did it all mean? And why had he never told me about any of it? I felt my frustration bubbling to the surface. I needed answers. I needed to know the full extent of the decisions he had made. Rachel called me later that evening, her voice upbeat, though I could tell she was busy with something. Claire, I've got news. I tracked down the law firm that handled your father's business dealings. They should have all the documents we need about the trust. I'm heading there first thing tomorrow to see if they'll release anything to us. I took a deep breath. Good. We're going to need all of it. I found a letter today from my father that mentions the beach house. It sounds like he made a decision, but it doesn't clarify everything. I need more answers. Rachel paused. I know this is getting complicated, but we're getting closer. Don't give up now. We'll find what we need. I hung up, feeling a bit better, but the pit in my stomach remained. The more I uncovered, the more I realized just how deep the rabbit hole went. My father's death had left me with more questions than answers, and every new discovery seemed to open up 100 more. I wasn't sure what the next step would be, but I knew one thing for certain. I was no longer just fighting for a house. I was fighting for the truth. The truth about my father's legacy, the truth about his relationships, and the truth about the family I had never truly known. The next day, Rachel and I met early in the morning at the law firm. We were greeted by a quiet receptionist who led us down a long hallway toward a small conference room. A lawyer named Karen Ellis met us inside, her face tight with suspicion as she shook our hands. I understand you're looking for information on your father's estate, Karen said, her tone neutral. What specifically do you need? We need to